Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
In this analysis episode, I'm going to tee off from the Apple CareKit announcement to discuss why ecosystems are so important and how they differ from IoT platforms.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars.
Hello everybody, this is Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening to the third analysis podcast. So as I said a couple times before, this is going to take me a little bit, I guess, of getting used to, a little bit of practice to kind of polish these up a little bit. I know they're a little bit rough right now, but the idea is to zero in on some recent news. So they're happening every 2 weeks right now. So every second week, I'm interviewing a guest, and then the following week, I'll be doing one of these analysis podcasts. Now, like I was saying, the idea is to zero in on a particular news subject, maybe that's been hit by a couple different directions, and talk about it from a business perspective. I'm always looking for feedback, good or bad. I have received a little bit of feedback, not very much, but the little I have received has been positive. And also, if you have maybe any particular subjects you want me to cover, you can always send me an email on that as well. I can always be found at bruce@iot-inc.com. In today's podcast, I want to cover the concept of ecosystems. Now, often ecosystems are conflated with platforms, and they're not the same thing. A platform is a technical component. The ecosystem is the business counterpart of the platform. Now, if you remember, we've done a number of different podcasts, interview podcasts with different platform manufacturers, and learned a lot about the different types of platforms. But they're effectively the plumbing. And what I do also say often is this is not generally where you're going to want to develop your intellectual property. It's often not going to be a core competency of a company, the plumbing. It'll be more in the analytics, the modeling, and the software application. But in any case, the ecosystem is a commercialization of the platform. Now, understanding the evolution of how we get to an ecosystem, I believe, is very important for when you're developing your IoT product and company strategy. Because over time, what's going to happen is that you're going to be able to connect different products together to be able to solve or deliver a particular customer result. But before we get into those details, I think it's interesting to look at the early adopters in IoT's technology adoption lifecycle curve, a la crossing the chasm. Generally, those early adopters are not going to be served by large companies that are in the IoT space. They're often going to be served, or mostly they're going to be served by startups. They're served by startups because the revenue opportunity, as it is right now in IoT, we're still early days, is relatively low and isn't high enough for a larger company to get involved. So generally you're going to find a number of small startups. They're the ones that are going to die, be killed off. They're going to be roadkill. And eventually, as the product segment evolves or matures, I should say, and we start moving from early adopters to mainstream customers, which implies a much larger market, it's not until then that you generally see the larger companies getting involved. But if you look at who is the early adopters, or who I should say, which companies are serving the early adopters, you've got all the big tech companies and many big non-tech companies. You got Apple, you got Google, you got Samsung. You've got Schneider Electric, as per our podcast last week, GE, John Deere. And so you have to ask yourself, why are they all there? I mean, the revenue is not there. The customers aren't there yet. They're there because they're planting their flag. And they're there because ecosystems, as we're going to discuss in more detail in this podcast, are strategically very important and worth the early investment. Now, if you think about it, IoT provides connectivity. An IoT product consists of, how I like to look at it anyway, is a software-defined product. It has a hardware-defined product. There's a network fabric that holds it all together. And then there's going to be a number of external systems. And those external systems are going to be providing and accepting data. You're going to have analytics. You're going to have data services. You're going to have business systems. And you're going to have other IoT products. So first, IoT is providing intra-connectivity within the product. But that last component of being able to connect products together creates this interconnectivity. And it is really what platforms will eventually evolve to, will be to bring together, as I was saying a little bit earlier, but bring together a number of different products to be able to solve or deliver the end result that a customer is looking for, or sometimes called the outcome that a customer is looking for. It's funny because platforms, in a way, if you think about it, they are going to be taking over from system integrators. We're really early in IoT. We're in that early adoption phase. And so just like the early days of web software, you need very specialized skills to take different products and bring them together. So bringing together some analytics with an application development environment, with a cloud system, looping it into your backhaul, connecting up your IT and OT networks. All these often will come from different players. Now, a platform offers a big part of that plumbing, but there's still a lot of different connections that need to be made to the platform. But a system integrator, in a way, is the platform, because they're the ones that are hand coding or stitching together the different components. So an IoT platform, eventually, as it evolves and becomes an ecosystem or commercialized into an ecosystem, it's going to be taking the place of the system integrator or the product design house. I like to think about it that way. And again, it's just simply because of where we are in the evolution of the technology. Now, if we're going to be able to bring different products together technically, and it's going to have benefit to the customer, then you can be sure that this is going to happen from a business point of view, or you can be sure that ecosystems are going to evolve, are going to emerge. And unlike in the mobile side, where you have just a couple horizontal ecosystems that are related to mobile OSs, iOS and Android, and we heard a little bit about this in the last podcast, but in IoT, there will be ecosystems that are going to be developed in each industry vertical. Now, the definition of the vertical will obviously depend on its size. How many ecosystems will be in there will also depend on its size. But if you extrapolate the thinking, then where it's going to go, and you can see the early strategic companies like Schneider, like GE, that see the light, that are betting down, betting everything on IoT, they are seeing the opportunity of getting in front of this before it happens. And so what they're trying to do is build their ecosystems in advance of other companies within their markets. Now, Schneider and GE are slightly different. Schneider, if you remember, they're not necessarily selling their platforms to their customers so their customers can have ecosystems. They are the ecosystem for energy management and automation. Whereas GE will be using it internally, but they're also selling the platform so that other companies can become or can establish ecosystems within their industries. So again, this is an important concept to think about, that in your industry, assuming you're developing an IoT product for an industry as opposed to being a vendor, but in your industry, eventually there will be an ecosystem that will be set up. How broad that is really depends on the industry itself. Now, it's not a zero-sum gain. An IoT product that is part of an ecosystem or part of a platform, you can look at it both ways, gets more value than on its own. And really, I've kind of played around with this a little bit, but if you look at the different levels of connectivity, then the Metcalfe's law applies to it's nested and it applies to each level. So, for example, the value of IoT products being connected within themselves. So right now an IoT product, as I was saying earlier, it has the intra-connectivity. There's more value because it extends beyond itself. It can gather information, it can gather data, I should say, from different sources. It can apply different functionality, such as analytics to it. And so you could argue that the number of sensors or the number of data sources, and data sources can be sensors, they can also be information services that are found on the internet. But you could argue that the number of data sources are proportionally, or I should say non-linearly proportioned to the value, because the cost of those data sources are linear, but the value is non-linear. And that's effectively the meaning of the Metcalfe's law. And I'm sure it's not 100% accurate. But if you go that a little bit further, so we start with a product, and then products being connected to each other are product systems. Often they'll come from the same vendor. Now again, you can argue that's another level of Metcalfe's law, because the more products that you can bring to a particular problem, the better it is. Now, an ecosystem brings together different product systems from different vendors. And again, you can think of that as, in Metcalfe's law's perspective, as being, again, non-linearly valuable. So, obviously it's a non-linear, we don't know what the exponent is, but if it is 2, which is what generally Metcalfe's law uses, then we've got 2 to the 2 to the 2, and so that an ecosystem is really, the value is to the 8th. So I'm not really sure what that means, but what I think it means is that there's a lot of value in ecosystems, and therefore you should plan that ecosystems will be in your market. And where I was going with this is a product that's by itself versus a product that's in an ecosystem are not equal in value. It's, again, not a zero-sum gain. There's more value to be part of an ecosystem. Now, ecosystems are technically supported by platforms. These platforms are going to be commercialized into an ecosystem within a vertical by the dominant IoT enterprise. So what that means is, and again, the dominant IoT enterprise doesn't necessarily mean the dominant incumbent. It means the enterprise that's within that vertical that has generally adopted IoT earlier and has built up this ecosystem. And they become the dominant one. They become the de facto to a certain extent. But again, there could be another competitor. There could be a number of different ecosystems within a particular industry. Now, enterprise ecosystem platforms that are being commercialized are going to be based on a technology that we talked about. You either have AEP platforms, provisioning platforms, connectivity platforms, and these are the 3 general classes that are sold by vendors. Also, you have open source platforms, and I believe that over time, open source platforms are going to become more and more the predominant platform that's used. After that, you've got cloud platforms, so some cloud providers are going to be providing a platform. On the other end of the scale, or I should say on the other end of IoT, you've got embedded system companies that are providing platforms. They could be used to be building your platform. Or you may custom build the platform altogether. And although Prith never mentioned it exactly, it seemed like they were not using a vendor's platform to build their platform upon. It seems like they custom built theirs. Now, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I mean, I always recommend, pretty much in all situations, that you either buy or rent a platform and not build. And the reason is very simple, is that IoT, the plumbing of IoT, which is what a platform is more or less taking care of, isn't where the value is. Unless you're a networking company. So unless you're a networking company, where your value is, it's going to be in the software model, it's going to be in the software application, it's going to be in the analytics, it's going to be how you transform that data into value. That's where IoT enterprises need to focus, in my view, need to focus their energy. So again, if we go back to the industry and we think that there's going to be different types of IoT companies, I kind of like to classify them in three different ways. You've got the lone wolf enterprises that are offering standalone IoT products. Well, then you have non-wolf companies that don't even have IoT products, right? But if you look at the companies that do have IoT products, and so we're moving along. And again, this is strategy, so we're just looking far in the future. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen in the next year or two, but what it does provide us is a directional vector to allow us or to help us make our daily decisions. Often, as everyone's listening here knows, within the day, you can make a decision in X direction or Y direction, and both of them are going to be correct. So what you need is a strategy that's going to be that guiding light or that directional vector that's going to help you make one of the two right decisions that are going to take you in strategically where you want to go. So that's what we're talking about here. Again, we're looking down the road, but we're saying what I'm saying is take into account that ecosystems will evolve into your market. So now, going back to it again, you're going to have, let's say, three different types of IoT enterprises. You're going to have those enterprises that I call the lone wolf enterprises that are offering a standalone IoT product. You're going to have the pack wolf enterprises. Now, they offer an IoT product that is part of one or more ecosystems. And then you're going to have the alpha wolf enterprises, and they're going to be the ones that are commercializing their platform into an ecosystem. Every competitive enterprise that is moving into the IoT direction needs to be part of an ecosystem. Now, whether or not they're an alpha or a pack wolf, I'm not sure I like that analogy, but it's sort of hopefully it's clear. But whether or not they are an alpha or a pack wolf is not as important that they're not a lone wolf, because again of this value, because of again of the value of using Metcalfe's law in this case, but just thinking about it, the exponential value of being part of something bigger. Why is that valuable? Because the more components that you can apply to get the customer result, the better. The closer you can get to what the customer wants, the better. And this gets into point products, solving point problems, and that's really not what the customer wants. The customer doesn't necessarily want to solve individual problems. What they want to do is get an end result. But I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. Now, ecosystem owners are going to have the strongest relationship with the customer. So again, if you consider the ecosystem being the business counterpart to the platform, they're going to have the closest relationship with the customer. They're going to be the one that's going to be closest to the monetization. So they're really in the best position. So let's discuss quickly an example. So John Deere is in the business of selling tractors. Farmers, they're not interested in buying tractors. What they're interested in is getting the best yield from the crops for the lowest amount of money. So John Deere is very early trying to establish a farming or precision ag platform within the farming industry to bring together the different components that yield what the customer result is. What the result that the customer wants, again, is this better yield for lower cost. So if you think about it, yes, you're going to have equipment, but in addition to equipment, you're going to have irrigation, you're going to have fertilizer, you're going to have seeds, and you're going to have to bring in the weather. So bringing together these different components, how do you get them to work together? Well, on a one-off by one-off basis, obviously you could have a system integrator, and they can bring them together, or the platform. So that's the concept. That's the concept of the strength of the platform. Now, over time, if I was in the precision agriculture, if I was in the farming industry and I had a product, then I probably would not want to be by myself. I probably would want to be part of this platform at a minimum, so being this pack wolf enterprise, or I may want to specialize, maybe go a little bit more vertical and start developing my own platform. So again, all this discussion of platform is really to help you make your strategic decisions. Now, it doesn't have to start out very technical. It can start out, and what I recommend to my clients is it can start with just business relationships. Again, using the precision agriculture, and I've done this for a number of different customers of mine or clients of mine, looking at all the different constituents that are providing part of the solution that the customer wants, identifies early on, who do you want to partner with? Perhaps if you are John Deere, you want to have a partner with irrigation systems. Now, it can just be a business relationship partner. I don't know if that's such a great example. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just a marketing relationship. Maybe it's distribution. But again, if you believe that over time, you're going to be able to provide a better solution to the farmer by bringing together different components, different technology components, in this case, farm equipment, irrigation, just using the two as an example, then it does make sense from a business development point of view that although you're not necessarily starting or plugging into the ecosystem today, that you may want to look at it and maybe just start establishing partnerships. Now again, no company, no matter what their size, is large enough to do it all in IoT. You can look at the example companies, they all have to work with other companies because what we're trying to do is something really big with IoT. We're trying to, again, deliver that outcome, or what I like to call that result that the customer wants, and that requires bringing together a number of different products. Now, another way of starting and not working in isolation is to join a consortium, an alliance, a group. There's a number of them out there. And again, this is something that I do recommend because, same thing, strategically, if you buy into this concept of ecosystems, platforms, technically ecosystems from a business point of view, then you probably want to be part of it. Now, another ecosystem can be based, I didn't mention this actually, but it can be based on one of these alliances or one of these consortiums. Often there will be, for example, the Open Interconnect Consortium, although I think they maybe changed their name recently. All-Seen Alliance, let's use that one as an example. They have a library, they have an API, and that is really their platform. You join their alliance, and then you can work with other companies that are within the alliance. The IIC is one of my clients, the Industrial Internet Consortium, and I just came back from their quarterly meeting last week, and they have a concept called test beds. Again, in this case, they're not dictating the underlying technology. It'll be one of the participating companies. But the reason these test beds are so important is because people understand strategically that you can't do it alone, and there will be, and maybe not thinking about it in these terms, but there will be these ecosystems that are going to develop. So you don't have to jump into it initially. You just have to know about this. You need to think about it. You need to think about the players that can come together within your industry to provide the results that your customer ultimately wants. And you can start small. You can start slowly. You can start with business partnerships, as I was saying, or you can join or you can join a consortium, an alliance, or a group. They're great ways to do it. So just to wrap things up, to bring things full circle, we're seeing this competition today. We're seeing it in healthcare. We've got Google. We've got Apple. We're seeing it in the smart home. So, this is something that's interesting. Who would have thought that ADP, which is a security service provider that now has the connected home products, would be a competitor to Google that has the Nest product? Well, why are they competitors? Well, they're competitors and potentially partners because there is going to be a platform and the corresponding ecosystem within the smart home. And this is a highly contested area right now. A lot of money is going into it. And a big part of the money is trying to seduce companies to join their particular platform. GE, another example, with their Predix platform, is on full court press to encourage small developers to write software for their platform, because as we know, the more components to the platform, whether it's software or with IoT, can also be hardware, the more value that it has. And of course, if you look at Schneider, as we discussed in last week's podcast, they have the energy management automation platform that they're building. So we're seeing it today, and I hope that this podcast just sort of clarifies why we're seeing it. And I hope it gives you some ideas when you're working on strategy, whether it's for your own company or for your client's company, to think about what it means in the longer term when ecosystems will form, and how do you navigate your strategy operation, how do you navigate your company operationally so that you're in a good position when that happens. And again, it's going to take time, but this is a temporal strategy that you want to do step by step. That's today's episode. Still, even as I'm recording it, it's just kind of strange because I'm just talking to myself, but hopefully it's of value. Would love to hear from people to validate that, so I know whether or not I should continue down this line. But assuming I don't hear anything horrible, then I will be doing this again in a couple weeks. Thanks a lot for listening. Okay, well, that was the third analysis episode 47. Looks like these are going to be the odd ones. I could use your help. If you enjoyed this show, or if you've been listening to the show for a little while and appreciate it, the way you could pay back is to leave a review. Simply go to iTunes. That's where all the reviews have to go. But you can't go there with the website. You have to actually go there with your app. So it's a little bit more trouble, but if you left a 5-star review, if you really enjoyed it, or even better, a written review, it would really help out the show. Now, if there's anything you'd like me to discuss during any upcoming analysis episode, send me an email. I can be reached at bruce@iotinc.com. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the third analysis episode. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be an eco-friendly one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.